Hi Hearties, welcome back to another scene analysis. I'm so glad to have you here. Thank you for coming back for another one of these. I know everyone's very excited to take a closer look at this one because it just feels so pivotal. And I know I said this about the last episode too, but this one is just mind-blowing. So let's dive right in.
Good for you.
Is this?
It's Florence's bridal bouquet.
After what felt like forever, we finally get to see a playful Nathan again. And this really sets the tone for this whole scene. It shows us what the relationship would look like in the future. We as watchers know that he only is this way around Elizabeth and Allie, who is his daughter, right? So it really says a lot that he feels this comfortable around Elizabeth too. And it says even more that Elizabeth is open to receiving it. She doesn't make a weird face, and I don't even think she knows that this is Florence's bouquet before she looks at it a bit longer. And yet we see a small smile on her face. She doesn't feel weird about him giving her a bouquet, even though she's still with Lucas.
Yeah, she wanted you to have them.
I just can't avoid these, can I?
Elizabeth talks while she's smiling right here, which shows us that she is feeling a bit nervous about this. It's important to note that Nathan answers her with a small chuckle. He doesn't say anything else. He just shivers a little bit, and it is Elizabeth that invites him to stay.
You look cold. I've got the kettle on if you'd like.
Yeah.
Elizabeth makes an inquiry here, and I think her lips are turned downward because she is uncertain about whether he wants to stay, and she's trying to show him that she wouldn't mind if he did. It's not an issue for her. Nathan answers by looking down for a second and thinking about it, and then he's just mirroring what she did before. Right here, you can see it again.
That'd be nice. Thank you. I was just about to head out on my rounds.
We see Elizabeth look down and to her left, possibly remembering something, but we also see her take a deep breath in, which shows us that it did take a bit of courage to ask him to stay. Nathan has a really big smile here, and I think that shows us that he is feeling nervous too.
I can't find my gloves.
Oh, I might have an old pair of Jack's if you'd like me to look.
No, it's fine.
Elizabeth offering Nathan an old pair of Jack's gloves is metaphorical. It answers the question of whether or not Nathan is a replacement for Jack. And the answer is right here. He shakes his head no. He refuses to wear Jack's old gloves. And this shows us that Elizabeth and Nathan's relationship is separate from her relationship with Jack Thornton.
I'll be fine after I warm up.
And while we're waiting on the kettle, why don't you take off your SERGE?
I gotta say, she looks kind of excited at the thought of having him take his SERGE off. But on a serious note, Nathan and Elizabeth have kind of gotten into a flow of conversation here, which again shows how familiar they are with one another.
And while we're waiting on the kettle, why don't you take off your SERGE?
Huh?
So I can warm it up for you. And while we're waiting on the kettle, why don't you take off your SERGE?
Huh?
I'm gonna rewind that just because it's so fun to watch.
And while we're waiting on the kettle, why don't you take off your SERGE?
Huh?
So I can warm it up for you.
When Elizabeth tells Nathan to take off his SERGE, he is so surprised because he just has no way of knowing that she used to do this with Jack. What Elizabeth is doing here is just being a total Mountie wife. She has this life hack that she knows will keep him warm, and she's just trying to help.
Oh, yeah, that'd be nice.
How did you come to have this?
I think this is the first time a very awkward moment happens between them and no one leaves, no one interrupts. They stay right there and they recover from it very quickly. This was kind of embarrassing, or it was at least awkward, and we see Elizabeth do a little bit of processing right there when he turns around, but she asks the next question right away and they just continue their conversation. And that is another really good sign. There's no interruptions this time.
Well, you left the wedding early, and
Right here we see some playfulness from Elizabeth.
Lawrence forgot to throw the bouquet. So, on her way out of town, she asked me to give them to you.
Thank you. Isn't Florence due home today from her honeymoon?
So Nathan follows her to the stove and maintains this closeness that it takes in order to have a conversation. He also crosses his arms, which could be because he's cold. I think that's it. But it could also be because he's just being a bit guarded or feeling a bit vulnerable without his SERGE on. I really can't say.
Yes. I forgot to give them to you. I remembered when I saw her at the Mercantile.
I used to do this for Jack on chilly mornings.
Right here, Elizabeth confirms that she used to do this for Jack. Also notice how it just kind of slips out of her, exactly like in the infirmary scene where she said, "Haven't you ever lost someone so close to your heart that it just tears you apart?" She goes really deep, really fast, because that's just how comfortable Nathan makes her feel, right? And his reaction is just perfect on his face as he kind of presses his lips together and does this little downward smile. We see empathy, but he doesn't say anything to her because there is nothing he has to say. He just has to listen.
That was very nice of Florence. It's a beautiful bouquet.
Here we see Elizabeth catch herself going too deep with the conversation, and she looks to her right to think of something to say and sees the flowers, so that's what she comes up with.
Yeah, it is. I guess she thought that you were the next one to be married.
Nathan just continues the deep talk. He's now talking about Elizabeth getting married, and at the thought of that, Elizabeth's mouth drops open, her eyes get wide, and she gets really tense. You see, she stops moving. And when Nathan notices this, his smile kind of gets smaller and his eyes look a bit more sad. He thinks if Elizabeth is going to get married, it is going to be Lucas because she made that choice, right? It's remarkable that he can stand there and say that.
This is probably ready now.
Yeah, I should probably head back, get on with my rounds.
Thanks.
So I want to note how many times Elizabeth and Nathan had to snap out of it. The first one was when she told him to take off his SERGE and he didn't know what she was saying. The second one was when she told him that she used to do this for Jack too. And the third one is right here when he tells her she might be the next one to get married. These are all moments that showcase how difficult it is for Nathan and Elizabeth to talk without it being a deep conversation and without it getting just a little bit vulnerable. She's not supposed to have these conversations with Nathan, and she knows it. She's supposed to have these conversations with Lucas. So that's why she's constantly trying to hold herself back and trying to stop herself from getting too comfortable and sharing too much with Nathan. But it's not working. And this is one of the reasons why I believe that these two are going to end up together. And I think Nathan frowning here is just him snapping out of it because he knows he made her a bit uncomfortable. And Elizabeth's smile looks a bit anxious. Where do I start? First of all, she looks really content here, and then she kind of gets lost in the moment right here. I think this is where she gets lost in the moment. Her hands are on his back, And then they go immediately to his collar, and notice his loving gaze right here. He's just looking at her in awe as always. And she snaps right out of it for like a fourth time. And she looks really shocked at what she's just done. Her eyes, they're just guilty eyes, I think. She's a bit scared because of how normal this feels for her. She has obviously done this with Jack many times. It's kind of ingrained in her brain on the one hand, but on the other hand, I think it's to show us how comfortable she really feels around Nathan. It is so easy for her to do something that only a wife or a fiance would do.
Yeah, this feels better.
Nathan just seems really unfazed by all of this. He continues to deeply look into her eyes, and I think it's because, to quote him,
Look, I know you feel the same way that I do.
he knows that they have this really deep connection. He just knows. And Elizabeth isn't quite there yet. She looks to her left. I think it's disbelief and embarrassment. And then she does this little head shake like, what did I just do?
Well, thank you for warming me up.
Thank you for the flowers.
As they walk out of her house, we still see this shock in Elizabeth's face, but then they just smile at each other. They are interrupted by Rosemary, but notice how they still face each other even when she interrupts. And Elizabeth and Nathan are also mirroring one another here, which points to attraction. They have their hands in a fig leaf position in front of them. It could also mean that they're just a bit guarded. And I don't know if I can say what Elizabeth is feeling here exactly. I don't know if it's about Nathan. I don't know if it's about her friendship with Rosemary. We definitely see some pain in her eyes and just overwhelm, which we can tell because of the deep breath that she takes in as she closes the door. So this is all I have for today. Thank you for watching, and as always, please comment your thoughts below. I can't wait to read them.